Here it is. The Dorothy Draper Espana Chest. I finally got it done. It's beautiful, it's glossy, it's glamorous, you know, has a lot of the big hardware, the leafing on the face. It's beautiful. This is, like I said, an iconic piece of furniture that was designed by Dorothy Draper, who was basically the first person to create the interior design industry. I have, I'll post a link about her and her design style, and it has a lot of great information about this particular piece of furniture. It's gonna show like the entire build process of this, the carcass, the drawers, the details that go into this particular piece of furniture. There's a lot of skills that it takes to make this piece of furniture. It's very unique. There's not much like it on the internet. And yeah, we design, at the Resplendent Crow, my business, we design furniture, we sell vintage furniture, we design new furniture, do all things furniture, and we paint a lot of it, we stain it. But you can go there, theresplendentcrow.com, and you can look at this particular piece of furniture, you know, what we sell it for, what it's made out of, all those kind of things. Anyway, so check out this video. I hope you like it. So let's take a peek at this model real quick, and this is just a quick little overview. You can see all the different framing panels in the center, end panels, and back, and just some joints. But anyway, we're going to start with the framing panels. These are the fundamentals of furniture making. I always talk about them in all my videos because plywood is just kind of a cheap way of doing things. This is the traditional way, so I always show it in my videos. Next, we're going to make our end panel. So I start by running this profile through my shaper. This is just a 1/4 inch dado, and you see it's just going to tear out the back of this thing, but that's okay, not a big deal. Next, we're gonna go over and we're gonna make the end panel assembly. Now, these are all being routed in because we can't run them through our table saw because of all the crazy joints that have to be stopped. All right, so we're back over on our pin router, and I'm gonna show you why a pin router is such a great tool for production. So if you need to make complex parts, or in this case, we're making end panels, I can copy these end panels and, you know, 1/4 of the time that it would normally take me. I mean, hell, maybe even faster. That'd be 1/10 of the time that it would take me to route out these end panels, okay? So, because our end panel here, we have a 1/4 inch dado that runs along the top here. God, see all this tear on this cheap plywood. Holy. Anyway, we have this dado that runs all the way along the top, right? So that's one operation, right? So you could run that through your table saw. Now in my case, I use a shaper. So I just ran my shaper bit across here, you know, so there's a pass. Right now, we have this panel, or this dado we need to run. We have this dado we need to run, but we can't run it through our table saw because we can't go back through here, right? So we have to use a router to cut this out, right? So you gotta make several passes with your router to get this thing cut, okay? And same thing here, we have another dado. We have to use this one. We have to use a router here as well. So you have all these router passes, right? And we come over to our next dado. We have this dado, but it stops short here, this 1/2 inch here. So again, you have to router here, you have to stop here, and then you also have to stop here, right? So several passes. And then finally, our top dado, same deal. We have to stop it here, and we have to stop it over here. So you have all this work that goes into making this panel. Now, the great thing about the pin router, I'm going to put a 1/4 inch pin in here, which is going to run through everything, and then I've got, run my bit up here, I've got a 1/4 inch upcut bit as well, so I can use that, and I can run this part through my router at one time and router out all of these details, right? It'll stop everywhere, it makes all the correct cuts, it's perfect. That's the magic of the pin router, right? And you can do this with all kinds of parts. So, because this is a Dorothy Draper Espana Chest, if I was gonna make, say I made 2 sets of these a month, okay? I make 4 cabinets a month of this, right? I save myself all those operations by just making one pattern of each side, right? So I make a pattern of each side using, you know, Baltic birch or MDF, and then I have that tool forever, You know, as long as my dimensions stay the same, I have this tool forever. And let's say my chest grows just a tiny bit. You know, it doesn't matter. My end panels stay the same. As long as the height and the width stay the same, I can use this pattern for every single one of these cabinets I ever build. And it will save me, over the course of a year, I mean, it can save me hours and hours and hours, you know, and that's money that goes in your pocket. All right, so let's glue this cabinet up. You can see I've got all these framing panels. Like again, I'm always talking about the importance of framing panels. Like it's part of traditional furniture making, and if you really want to set yourself apart, like stop using plywood. Like you're gonna always use plywood for your cabinets. You can't get around it. But that center panel is the thing that just looks like old furniture because that's how old furniture was made. So you see that I always use them. I'm always talking about them because again, it's very important that you show your customers quality and you show people that you understand the fundamentals of furniture making. So anyway, we're gonna go ahead and put all our dominoes on here, and I just map all these out. There's plenty of high production ways to map those out in a quicker fashion, but I'm just mapping out by hand. Of course, here I'm using my domino, you know, and there's no secrets. I don't have any special tools. I just lay the thing on there, line it up as best I can, and let it rip, and works out just fine every time. Again, I put just a little bit of glue inside of each domino joint. You know, not very much, a drop, I would say. I believe those tendons kind of expand a little bit. You know, a little bit of glue on the joints, tap that bad boy into place, and then we'll clamp it up and let it dry for a couple of hours. I'm not a big fan of letting things dry overnight. I mean, unless it's like glue ups for legs and stuff like that. I let things dry for a couple of hours and then I move on. So, and you notice I don't use any nails. I'm not a fan of nails. Because we high gloss lacquer a lot of furniture, we can't get away with using nails. What I'm doing is I'm making sure that I have a little bit of a recess so that I have some room to put a little bit of hardwood. And actually this is just a piece of edge banding, making sure that it's kind of flush. I need a little bit of place to put the hardwood. I don't generally use edge banding if I can help it, because I feel like it's super cheap, and my clients pay so much money for my furniture, I just can't use edge banding. So anyway, I'm gonna route just a little bit more of a recess because I didn't quite have enough. So you can say I just take straight edge router and I just route out, you know, probably 6/100 of an inch. I'm gonna make up a little bit of my own edge banding or nosing, whatever you want to call it. And we're just gonna glue this stuff on, and all I do is tape it up. I don't use any special clamps or anything like that. It doesn't take much. You just want to make sure that your banding or nosing is down all the way. Sometimes it'll want to move on you a little bit. So you want to make sure you get it started really well and then just tape the crap out of it, and you're good to go. Okay, so what I want to talk about now is I want to talk about the face trim, right? The face detail of this Espana chest, okay? This is the number one thing that people leave off when they're making the replica of this cabinet because you can't cheat it, right? You could get knives made, custom knives for your planer, right, or molder, and you can cut them out. You could also send this off to a professional mill shop and they'll cut it for you as well. But the cost is really expensive, so most people leave this off. But I'm gonna show you how to make this with your router table. All right, so things you're gonna need to make this trim, you're gonna need a 1/2 inch radius cove bit, right? We're gonna cut a concaved cove, right? So then you need to mill yourself up. It's a big chunk of wood, right? So the important thing is that you get it 1/8 of an inch, 1 1/8 thick, so 1.125 thick, and then leave it fat, right? Get a piece of material that's say 6 inches, right? Because what's gonna happen is you're gonna create the profile on this side, and then you're gonna cut it off on your table saw, right? So that you can cut it safely. And then you can take and you can make more material on this side and then cut it off on your table saw. And you kind of step this stuff down to create all the material that you need to make one of these chests. So we got our router set up, and we're basically just gonna make a pass, right? We're gonna move that fence over, bring that bit up, and we're gonna continue to make passes until we get the correct profile that we're gonna get. So you just have to be patient. It probably takes, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 passes, you know, per piece of trim to get the correct profile. table saw, you got to cut all these little rabbets out, right? You got a top rabbet, you got a bottom rabbet. Now what you know about this is that they're different. One is 3/16 and one is an 8. And you might think, well, that's not a big deal, but it is a big deal, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to make a replica cabinet that is, you know, as close to being indistinguishable from the original as you possibly can. And it's important to get this detail right. If you're going to go to all the trouble to make this, you might as well try and get it right. So if you have a table saw, I'll show you how to do that. Notice I'm cutting this backwards. So the trim piece itself is going to be facing the table saw. Now we're going to turn this thing around. We're going to run it the other direction now so that we can cut the upper profile here. Now I have a piece of trim made. Okay. So the final step is that we'll basically take ourselves here a line. We're going to trace ourselves a line as to where we want this to be. Let's say it's right there. Then we're going to run that through our table saw. So we'll turn this over and we'll run it through here, leaving the trim side out, right? So that we have a nice safe cut. And then we'll repeat the process and cut out the next piece, you know. And this is why when you do this, you want to cut these out in big, long pieces. Preferably stuff, you know, it's like 6-7 feet. All right, move on to our face frame here. So I forgot to do a video of creating this face frame. If somebody wants that, please let me know. It is fairly involved. But anyway, I just shoot a nail in the end of each miter, put a little bit of glue on the face frame. And glue is all you need. You know, some people might say you need a biscuit or a tenon or something there to hold it, but honestly, I've got cabinets that are 30 years old and the face frames haven't moved an inch. So I'm not always a supporter of the fact that you have to have some kind of mechanical fastener for your face frames. So we'll clamp this thing up, let it dry again for a couple hours, and move on to the next thing. So moving on to slides, you see I use undermount slides. And I'm gonna put these blocks in here for my standoffs for the slides. Anyway, the original cabinet just used one wooden slide, and the drawers are huge on this thing, so it's always a pain in the butt to get those drawers to operate on the vintage pieces. So this is gonna be a great modern way for customers to actually use this furniture the way it was intended to be used, which was all the time. So nice undermount slides. Bloom makes the best stuff. I'm a big advocate of theirs, and I've tried KV's undermount slides, and I haven't found anything better than Bloom, you know, so it's not an advertisement, it just is what it is. They're the best of the best. So anyway, I use washer head screws. So now I'm onto my drawers. I have a video on drawers in the description. I'm not going to talk too much about them. You know, I sand my drawers, I put them all together, I use miter locks, I make everything out of cherry if I can. Sometimes I'll make my drawer boxes out of walnut. But I do not use dovetails. I say it in all my videos. I hate dovetails. I'm going to be the guy that's going to wreck the dovetail industry. All right, so now we're going to start gapping. You know, every cabinet has to be gapped. So got myself a little 1000 shim here. This is what I use for gapping because we paint furniture. We have to allow buildup for primer and paint on both sides. I just put my chisel on here, pencil. Really nice. Easy to start gapping. And generally, when I gap a cabinet, I start from the bottom and kind of work up, but depending on how much of a gap your drawers already have, you can go any direction you like. So, but anyway, starting from the bottom is generally pretty good though. That way, if gravity takes a hold, you know, your things kind of move down if your gaps were tight to begin with. So bear that kind of stuff in mind. Okay, so what I did here is I took an etching of the original profile on this cabinet. And right here, I am taking one of the patterns on the 3-pattern front, and I'm cutting it up here, and I'm going to use some spray adhesive, bond this to the 1/4" MDF. Now I'll stick this to the MDF, and I'm basically going to trace out the outer pattern and the inner pattern because honestly I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to make this. And I traced this pattern out using my bandsaw and sander, edge sander and oscillating spindle sander to create all of these shapes, right? And I got my contour to where it actually matched my pattern correctly. I mean, you can see here where I've had to go in and fill. Like I sanded too much there, I sanded too much there. So I went in and I filled those things with an epoxy filler. And anyway, once I got the correct profile, I went ahead and I put that onto a piece of 1/2" MDF, right? From there, I would take that 1/2" MDF, or excuse me, that 1/4" MDF, I would double stick it onto my part here, and I would go over my pin router, and I would run a 3/4" router bit all the way along the outside. And then that gave me the exact profile of the original rabbet. I could take my profile and I could copy it onto this piece of 1/2" MDF, right? So then I can take that, put that on my drawer fronts and router that out on my pin router as well. The iconic shape that is over here. So this iconic shape, this is the Dorothy Draper Espana details on the front of these. It's very iconic. It's been, like I said, all over movies, all over magazines. It's pretty cool. What going on here is we have, I'm running a 1/4" straight cutter with a 1/2" pin, which kicks that 1/4" cutter over to the center of my jig here. So I'm routing out that detail on this front. So here I'm switching over to this, it's an 1/8" point cutting bit, a radius cutting bit, and I'm adjusting the height up, and I'm also changing my pin to a 3/8" pin. That's gonna walk this radius over from the last profile, and I'll run it around here. And then here, now I'm switching over to a 5/8" pin, and I'm stepping it up again to create this profile. So it's a lot of work, and there's much faster ways to do this if you have custom router bits. Here's the finished product. So it's a beautiful pattern, it takes a lot of work, but all right, so we're going to start sanding our prime pieces. This is one of the fronts, and I'll just kind of give you a quick overview on what we do here. So the prime and sander is a vinyl sealer, and I've got some 320 grit sandpaper on my sander here. I'm just going to start sanding this thing, and then I'm kind of looking for imperfections, things that are low, things like that. So I look at it really close. I'll run my hands over it. Sometimes I'll put a light on it just to kind of see what's going on. Now you'll notice that when I'm sanding all this stuff here, I actually have a bunch of this 1/4" foam. I'll show this down here. It's 1/4" foam right here. And I do that because it's important that you don't scratch the thing that you're working on. So when you're getting into higher grits, especially when you're dealing with like high gloss lacquers, any scratches that you have will show up in the paint. So it's important that as you're vibrating, along with the sander, that you're not inadvertently scratching the backside, stuff like that. So when you sand the backside, it's even more important because now the front side, the good side, is face down. So if you don't have something that can absorb all the shock and keep the piece from getting scratched up, you're going to be in a world of hurt. Here in the booth, we're gonna put 3 coats of pre-catalyzed nitrous cellulose lacquer on here, and we'll probably 800 grit sand in between each. And this is a very light sanding. It's not anything, we're not looking really for imperfections. We will fill any imperfections that we find, but that's what's gonna give us this silky, smooth, buttery finish that people desire. So here I'm looking at this thing and I'm pointing out imperfections, right? And I'm gonna go and I'm gonna fill all these things. So you can see that we have all of this tape here that I put down. I put on my auto body filler. Now I'm going to just take the tape off. Gives me less stuff to sand. Back in the booth for another coat of lacquer. Little tip here, you want people to desire your products. You don't want them to want them, you want them to desire them, to lust after them. And that's what we create with these high gloss lacquered furniture pieces. This is the finished product. It looks like a car. Like I said, people lust after our furniture. They lust after the finish. And the finish is, you can't fast track it. It just takes work. Because this cabinet is painted, it is high gloss lacquered, just like it was back when this cabinet was originally made, I believe back in the 30s. So we have to, because we have all of our slides and everything in here, we mask all that off, obviously because we don't want to get paint all over the undermount slide mechanisms. And the originals would have used wood slides, but because we're making a modern version of this, we're going to use these soft close slides, which modern customers absolutely love. So anyway, we got to take all the tape off of these, and then we can go ahead and start putting our drawer boxes in here and getting our fronts and everything attached. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and put on all of our pulls, right? This cabinet gets 9 pulls, a lot of pulls. So what I'm gonna use is I'm gonna use blue tape or painter's tape, because the painter's tape doesn't stick to the painted surface very much. And because it's high gloss lacquer, you have to be kind of careful when you're dealing with the paint, because although high gloss lacquer is definitely strong, it can scratch fairly easily. You can wipe it down with naphtha, you can wipe it down with microfiber cloths, but you definitely need to be careful. So anyway, so we'll put a little bit of tape on here. And I'll start with the top drawer front, then I'll work my way down. Then I'll start by finding center on the detail that I have here, and then I'm gonna measure up for, in this case, because it's a pull, the center is actually different than where the screw goes, right? This particular ring pull is 3 inches, but the place that you put the actual screw is about 1 1/8 inches from center up. So you have to do your calculations correctly. So we now have our center point. Like I said, we're gonna measure up 1 1/8 to give us the exact location we want our screw to go, so that when when our pull is set, it's exactly in the center of our routed detail. All right, here our ring pull is. You can see kind of what I'm talking about. This is where the screw is gonna go, but because center is actually right about here, it's important we measure up that 1 1/8 inches. So I'm here at the house and I brought this Dorothy Draper cabinet home. How I do this gold leafing, the stuff that you're gonna need is you're gonna need a brush. This is called, I believe it's called a cat's tongue or a cat's paw. I'll post a link in the video below. I don't exactly remember it, but yeah, I think that's what it's called. Anyway, it has just kind of a rounded, maybe a convex kind of shape to it, and it helps to create the shape on the main detail for this cabinet. So the other thing you're gonna need is you're gonna need some of this liquid leaf, and I'll also put a link for this as well. Really prefer this liquid leaf product over to actual gold leaf. Gold leaf it just doesn't look right, and I don't know if maybe I'm just not that good at it. I've just never been impressed with it. It's not bright enough, doesn't have the right kind of look. Building up coats, right, and it goes on very thin, so you need to give it a good 5 minutes in between coats. And the thing about this is that you're going to end up putting on probably 5 coats by the time it's all said and done to build those layers up to get that lush, that rich, lush gold look. Then the other thing I want to say is if you get paint on the face of your drawer front, not a big deal. It comes off with naphtha. It does take a couple wipes with the naphtha because as you wipe it, because of the gold that's in there, it kind of moves the gold around the surface, right? So you wipe it off once, let that naphtha dry, hit it again, let that naphtha dry, get more off, and then you have to keep wiping it off, but eventually it will all come off. And it might take 3 or 4 wipes, you know, but it will all come off. And then if it doesn't come off, or if you are just not happy with it, then we can polish it. And when we polish it, it'll take all that gold off and make it look super brilliant and glossy. Last part of the process, we built up our coats of paint, of leafing paint, and it looks pretty consistent. So what you're basically trying to do is you're just trying to get the base color to not show through very much. A little bit's okay. It kind of, you know, has a little bit character to it. But for the most part, we're trying to build those coats up, and now we're gonna wipe all of it off with naphtha. Just grab myself a rag, a little bit of naphtha on there. And in this case, less is definitely more, but you can see all along here, got lots of spots where we need to wipe it all down. Just go ahead and wipe it. And as we wipe it, like I said, it's gonna streak a little bit, and that's fine. It's gonna take a couple of wiping sessions, or whatever you want to call it, to get the leafing off. So then you can see it kind of smears the color a little bit, or the leafing a little bit, and again, that's fine. Just get the heavy stuff off. All right, so that's gonna give us the bulk of the heavy stuff off. So we'll let this stuff dry for a second, and then we're gonna hit it again. And we'll continue to do that until all the gold is off of the black lacquer.